The lonely mourner in the alien graveyard, the sky burned in shades of red and gold as the twin suns began to sink behind the jagged hills. The air was quiet, heavy with the dry scent of dust and old stone. Shadows stretched long over the alien graveyard, where rows of strange markers rose from the ground like silent teeth. Here, among the forgotten, one figure knelt alone. She was a woman of rare beauty. Even by alien standards, her skin was pale with a faint silver glow, like moonlight on still water. Her hair, long and silvery white, fell in waves down her back, catching the last rays of sunlight, but her eyes, large and luminous, were heavy with grief. She wore a faded dress that had once been fine, now worn thin by time and hardship. In her hands, she held a small pendant made of black crystal, the only thing left of the one she mourned. No one came near her. Other aliens passed by quickly, their gazes sliding away as if she carried a curse. She had been here for hours, unmoving except for the slow rise and fall of her breathing. Her knees rested in the dust, her fingers tracing the grooves of the grave marker before her. It was different from the others, smaller, without a name, only a strange carved symbol. A symbol that to her meant everything. It meant loss, sacrifice, and the end of her world. She whispered in her native tongue, her voice trembling, "I will not forget you." Her breath caught as memories rose unbidden. Laughter in the rain, the warmth of a hand in hers. The final scream when everything went wrong. She pressed the pendant to her lips, and her shoulders shook. The graveyard was nearly empty now. The last visitors had left when the suns dipped lower, knowing the guards would soon come to clear the grounds. But she stayed, as she always did, hoping the silence would somehow let her hear his voice again. It never did, but she stayed anyway. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong here. Heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, not the light tread of her own people, nor the clanking boots of soldiers. Something else, something heavier. Her heart gave a small jump. She turned, her hair catching the light, and froze. A human, she had never seen one in person, only in old news images and whispered rumors. Humans rarely came to this city. They were outsiders here, often unwelcome, yet here one stood, tall and broad-shouldered, his skin tanned by many suns. His clothes were simple, dusty from travel, but clean. A long coat hung loosely on him. And there was something about his stance, calm, steady, unafraid. He said nothing. He only looked at the grave marker, his eyes steady and unreadable. For a moment, she felt the air grow heavier between them. Why was he here? Why was he looking at this grave? She straightened slightly, her voice uncertain. "This is not your place," she said quietly. Still, he didn't speak. Instead, he stepped closer and went down on one knee beside her. His gaze fixed on the symbol carved into the stone. He reached out and brushed some dust from the surface with his fingers. Then he looked at her, his eyes carrying something strange, not pity, but something deeper. "You've been here a long time," he said at last, his voice low and rough. She narrowed her eyes, unsure whether to answer. "Yes," she whispered. "It matters to you," he said, more like a statement than a question. Her lips trembled. "It was someone I loved," she admitted, her voice breaking. He nodded once, slowly, as if he understood more than she had told him. Then he looked back at the grave, his brow furrowed as he studied the symbol. "What does it mean?" he asked. She hesitated before replying. "It means it's gone forever." The human was silent for a long moment. Then, in a tone almost too soft to hear, he said, "Maybe not." The words struck her like a sudden wind. Her heart skipped a beat. What could he mean? Did he know something? She searched his face, but his expression gave nothing away. Only his eyes seemed to hold a quiet fire. The wind picked up slightly, carrying grains of sand between the graves. The light of the setting suns bathed them both in a warm, fading glow, and for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her chest. Not hope exactly, but the shadow of it. She didn't know who this human was, or why he had come, but she knew one thing. Her long, silent grief had just been interrupted, and her life might never be the same again. A stranger who shouldn't be here. She didn't move. The alien woman sat frozen, her silver eyes fixed on the human's face. He was a stranger, a human. In a place where no human should be, this graveyard was not meant for outsiders. Especially not one from Earth, the city they were in. Rylora 9. Was closed to human visitors after the last war. No human had been allowed to walk these streets for years. So what was this man doing here, in the dust of the forgotten dead? And why did he kneel at this grave, her grave, the one she'd guarded with tears and silence for so long? He looked at the stone again, brushing it with his hand like it was something sacred. His touch was gentle, respectful, not like the guards who kicked at the markers when they thought no one was watching. Then he looked at her, his voice calm. His name was Kareth, wasn't it? Her breath caught. She hadn't said that name in years, not aloud. Her fingers curled around the pendant at her chest as if to protect it. How do you know that name? She asked, her voice shaking. The human didn't smile. But there was something in his eyes. Sorrow, maybe understanding. I heard it once. A long time ago, he said, from someone who said Kareth saved them. Her heart pounded. No one spoke of Kareth anymore. Not since he was declared a traitor and erased from records. Even saying his name could bring punishment. But this human had said it without fear. Without hesitation, she stood slowly, still cautious. What do you want? She asked. He stood as well, brushing sand off his coat. Answers, he replied. And maybe something more. She narrowed her eyes. There are no answers here, she said. Only pain. He looked around the empty graveyard, his gaze steady. Pain carries truth, he said. I came to find both. Her mind raced. Was he lying? Was he sent by the government? Was this some trap to make her speak of things better left buried? But something about his voice felt honest, heavy, like he carried loss too. You came a long way to find a grave, she said, still guarded. He looked at her, and for a moment the silence between them was louder than words. I didn't just come for the grave, he said quietly. I came because I owed him. The air seemed to grow colder despite the desert heat. She stepped back, her hands trembling. No one owes a traitor, she whispered. But the human shook his head. No, he said firmly. He wasn't a traitor. She stared at him. Her heart torn open by those words. No one had said that in so long, not even her. Not since the day the soldiers dragged Kareth's body away and dumped him into the dirt like garbage. Not since the day they marked her as a widow of a criminal. Not since her people turned their backs on her. How do you know that? She asked, her voice cracking. Because he saved my unit. The human said, there was a fight. Far from here, between raiders and civilians. And we were caught in the middle. Kareth. He crossed lines, risked his life, saved everyone. Human and alien. And he died doing it. She collapsed to her knees again. The grief hitting her like a fresh wave. Her hands covered her mouth as a sob escaped her lips. You saw it? She asked, barely able to speak. I was there, he replied, his voice rough with memory. I was only a soldier, broken and bleeding, but he carried me out himself. Tears streamed down her face. For so long she had believed she was the only one who remembered him as a hero. Everyone else erased him, painted lies over his courage. But now, here stood proof, a living, breathing human who had seen the truth. The human knelt beside her again, not touching her, but close enough to share the space of her sorrow. I didn't know he had someone, he said, glancing at the pendant. He never spoke of anyone, but I saw the way he looked at a small crystal like that before he died. She clutched the pendant tighter. It was mine, she whispered. He carried it with him. The human nodded. I buried one just like it with him, he said. Her eyes widened. You buried him? They wouldn't let me, he said bitterly. But I made sure he wasn't alone when he died. He saved my life. I promised myself I'd find whoever he left behind and tell them. Her whole body trembled. For years, she had. Mourned in silence, convinced no one else cared. Now, for the first time, she felt her grief being seen. I'm Lyra, she said softly. I'm Jacob, he replied. The suns dipped lower, painting the sky in deep amber and violet, and the two of them, alien and human, sat side by side among the dead, bound by a grave and a man both had loved in their own way, neither knowing that this moment was only the beginning. Stories of the lost the stars were starting to show above the city of Rylanine. Tiny silver lights blinked against the deep purple sky as silence wrapped the alien graveyard like a blanket. Lyra sat close to the human named Jacob, her hands still. Trembling, her eyes swollen from crying. For years, she had sat by that grave in silence. But tonight, words had broken through the stillness. Jacob had brought memories with him. Memories of Kareth, the one she had loved. The one they had buried like a criminal. Yet here was this human speaking of Kareth as a hero, and for the first time. Her heart dared to believe it wasn't just her imagination. Jacob looked toward the horizon where the last bit of sunlight faded into the darkness. I don't know why he saved us, he said, voice soft. We were strangers to him, and still he came, like he was born to protect. Lyra nodded slowly. That was him, she whispered. He always did what others were too afraid to do. She picked up a small rock near the grave and turned it over in her hand. Tell me, she said, what happened that day? Jacob leaned back slightly, the sand crunching under his coat. He looked tired, not from the road, but from memory. There was a small village on the edge of the neutral zone, he began. We had taken shelter there, me and 6 others. After our transport crashed, but the village was under attack. Raiders, mercenaries. Slavers, the kind who don't care what race you are, as long as they can sell you. Lyra's fists clenched. She knew those types too well. They hit the village hard. Jacob continued, and we were trapped. We fought, but we're losing fast. I got separated, he said, his voice suddenly distant. And I thought I was going to die. She leaned in closer, drawn to his story. Then he appeared, Jacob said, eyes sharp with memory. Kareth, he charged in from nowhere, not with orders, not with backup. He had a broken blaster, a spear, and that wild fire in his eyes, and he didn't hesitate. Lyra smiled faintly through her tears. That sounds like him, she whispered. Jacob nodded. He fought like 10 men, he said, pushed the raiders back and carried 3 of us out, one by one, when he got to me. I was barely conscious, but I remember him saying, "You're not dying today, human," and he smiled. Like he already knew he wouldn't. Make it, Lyra's heart twisted as she listened. She had always imagined his final moments alone, hunted, hated, but now she saw him in a new light. Dying with courage, surrounded by people he chose to save. Not for duty, but for who he was. Jacob looked down at his hands. I tried to tell the others after, he said. Tried to report what he did, but no one wanted to hear it. They had already made their decision. Labeled him a traitor. Erased his name. Lyra's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they carried something else. Not just sorrow, but rage. How can they lie like that? She asked, how? Can the truth be so easy to bury? Jacob's gaze locked with hers. It's not buried, he said, not completely. That's why I'm here, to find someone who remembers. Someone who still believes he was a good man, She clutched the pendant tightly in her palm. "I remember," she said, voice firm now. "I always did." For a moment, the silence returned, but it was a different silence now, not of grief, but of connection. They were no longer strangers. Their stories had woven together under the stars. Jacob reached into his coat and pulled out a small data chip wrapped in cloth. "I took this from the crash site," he said. "It belonged to Kareth. I never opened it, I thought. Maybe it was meant for someone else." Lyra's fingers hesitated before taking it. Her heart pounded in her chest. The data chip was cold and smooth in her hand. She didn't know what it contained. A message, a memory, a final goodbye. But she felt it. This could be the piece of truth she needed. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll help me," Jacob said. "Say we'll make the truth known." She looked up at him, our tears shining in the moonlight. "I will," she said, voice strong. For him, the stars above them shimmered brighter. And somewhere, in the deep quiet of the universe, the story of Kareth began to rise again. The soldiers arrived. The air had turned colder as the second moon of Reloranine rose above the cliffs. Its pale blue light fell across the graveyard, casting long shadows between the grave markers. Jacob and Lyra sat close together near Kareth's grave, their voices quiet but their hearts filled with fire. The data chip rested in Lyra's lap, untouched for now, but glowing faintly with hidden truth. She didn't want to open it yet. She wanted to hold on to the moment, the peace, the shared memories, the warmth of being seen. But peace didn't last long in this city, especially not for someone like her. Especially not beside the grave of a so-called traitor. The sound of armored boots broke the silence. Clank, 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 steady and cold like machines. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She knew that sound too well. She turned her head slowly. And there they were. 3 alien soldiers in black and crimson uniforms, their helmets reflecting the moonlight. They walked with the swagger of those who believed they had power, not just over law, but over truth. The lead soldier raised a hand, his voice sharp. "You are not allowed here after dusk," he said, looking straight at Lyra. Her body tensed, but she didn't move. Jacob stood, calm but alert. "She's mourning," he said plainly. "She hasn't done anything wrong." The soldier turned to him, his tone colder now. "And you?" he growled. "A human in restricted territory. How did you even get in?" Jacob didn't blink. "Walked," he said simply. The second soldier stepped forward, hand on his weapon. "You think this is a joke, outsider?" He spat. "You're trespassing on sacred ground." Lyra stood as well now, her hand clutching the data chip tightly. "This is not sacred to them," she said, her voice bitter. "They left Kareth here like garbage, and now they want to chase away those who remember him." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably, but their leader took a step forward. "You are not to speak that name," he hissed. Lyra's eyes blazed. "Then why are you so afraid of it?" she asked. "Isn't a lie strong enough to silence the truth?" The third soldier raised his weapon slightly. "Enough," he barked. "Leave now or face arrest." Jacob didn't move. His stance remained firm, eyes locked on the lead soldier. "She stays," he said calmly. The soldier stiffened, surprised by his boldness. "This is not your world, human," the leader warned. "No," Jacob replied, "but a grave is a grave everywhere. And I don't walk away when someone's being threatened for remembering the truth." The second soldier stepped forward aggressively. "Do you want to be a hero too?" he snapped. Jacob tilted his head slightly. "No," he said. "I already met the hero." Tension crackled in the air. Lyra placed a gentle hand on Jacob's arm, her voice low but steady. "They'll hurt you," she whispered. Jacob looked down at her. "Not before I make them look in the mirror," he said. The lead soldier raised his hand again. motioning to the others, but before he could give the order, the third soldier, younger, quieter, spoke. "Wait," he said. Maybe we don't need to fight here." The other two glared at him, but he looked nervous. "We're not supposed to draw blood near the graves," he added. "You know the rule." The leader cursed under his breath. He turned to Lyra, voice hard. "You have until sunrise," he said. "Then be gone. To mourn a traitor is to invite punishment." Lyra nodded once, her jaw tight. The soldiers turned and marched away, their boots fading into the night. When they were gone, Lyra sank to her knees, her legs finally giving out. Jacob sat beside her again, the quiet returning like a long breath. She looked at him, eyes wide. "You stood up to them," she said. "No one has done that for me since." "Since him?" Jacob shrugged slightly. "You shouldn't have to mourn in fear." He said, "Grief is not a crime." Her fingers opened slowly, revealing the chip again. It pulsed gently, waiting to be seen. "I think it's time," she said. Softly, Jacob nodded. "I'll be here," he said. "Whatever it shows, you won't be alone." She inserted the chip into her wrist device. A soft hum filled the air as blue light flickered across her skin. Then a voice, familiar, gentle, and full of love, spilled into the night. It was Kareth, speaking from beyond the grave. Lyra gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Jacob watched in silence as the message played. Kareth's words weren't just for her. They were meant for everyone, a truth too powerful to stay hidden. The moon above watched quietly as secrets long buried began to rise, and for the first time, justice stirred in the shadows. A plan to restore honor. The recording echoed softly between the silent graves. Kareth's voice was calm, steady, and filled with something Lyra had not heard in so long. Hope. His message wasn't just a farewell, it was a secret. "I was not supposed to be here," Kareth's voice said. "If you're hearing this, then I failed to return. I was asked to betray my people, to ignore the cries of innocence. But I chose differently. I chose to protect life, not power." Lyra's eyes were wide, her lips trembling. Jacob sat beside her, unmoving. As the full message played out, names, locations, commands, Kareth had spoken them all. Every detail of the mission he was never meant to survive. When the recording ended, the device on Lyra's wrist powered down. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence from before. Now, it was filled with purpose. Jacob looked at her. "That message can clear his name," he said. "More than that," Lyra whispered. "It could destroy the ones who called him a traitor." She stood. Slowly, her knees still weak, her eyes looked different now, not just sad, but determined. "He wanted this truth to live," she said. "He trusted someone would find it." Jacob rose too, brushing dust from his coat. "I know people who can help spread it," he said. "I have contacts, old friends, ex-soldiers, even journalists. But we have to move fast. The longer we wait, the more they'll try to erase it." Lyra nodded. "I know a place," she said. "An old resistance outpost in the underlevels. They have a secure transmitter." "Hard to trace," Jacob smiled faintly, impressed. "You're full of surprises," he said. "I used to be a fighter," she replied, "before I was a mourner." They left the graveyard quickly, slipping into the shadows of the quiet city. Ryla Renane was different at night, quieter, colder, and more dangerous, but neither of them felt fear now, only fire. They moved through alleys and dark corners. Past flickering lights and silent watchers, the city above slept, but below, something else was waking at the entrance of the underground. Levels. Lyra tapped a hidden panel. A door slid open into darkness. Jacob followed without hesitation. The old resistance outpost was deep underground. Rusty walls, old cables, blinking lights, forgotten by most, but not by her. "This used to be home," she said, running her hand along the dusty walls. "We planned our hopes here, and watched them die. Jacob helped her power up the transmitter. The system hummed to life slowly. Screen by screen, she plugged in the chip, and Kareth's message appeared again, floating in blue light. Ready? To send. Jacob asked. Lyra hesitated. Once this goes out, they'll know it was me, she said. They'll come for me. He looked her in the eyes. Then we don't let you face them alone. She pressed the button. The signal shot into space, bouncing from relay to relay, reaching systems across the sector. Within moments, it was in the hands of rebels, reporters, and neutral planets. The truth was out, but so were the enemies. Alarms blared suddenly. Lyra turned sharply. They've tracked the signal, she said. We have to go now. Jacob grabbed the chip and stuffed it into his pocket. They raced down a side tunnel. As boots thundered above, flashlights cut through the darkness. Voices shouted orders. They're already inside, Jacob said, pulling her forward. There's a way out through the supply shafts. Lyra shouted. Follow me. They darted. Through tight spaces, dodging falling pipes and broken stairs, the old metal groaned beneath their feet. Behind them, soldiers chased, faster, louder, more aggressive, but Jacob was stronger. And Lyra knew every turn, every corner, finally. They burst out into an abandoned street, lit only by flickering red lights. They were free for now, but the silence was broken by distant shouting and more approaching steps. Lyra leaned against a wall, catching her breath. Her chest heaved. But her eyes were bright. It's done, she gasped. The message is out. Jacob nodded. They'll try to silence it, he said. But now the galaxy knows the truth. She looked at him. They'll hunt us. He smiled. Let them, he said. Let them chase the ones who carry the truth in the distance. Sirens wailed, but Lyra didn't flinch. Her mourning days were over. Now she was a fighter. Again, and beside her stood a human who refused to let her stand alone. Asterisk the truth beneath the surface, they didn't stop running until the lights of the city were far behind them. Jacob and Lyra ducked into an old maintenance tunnel, hidden behind overgrown metal shutters. Their breath came in short bursts, lungs burning, but they were alive. And more importantly, the message was out. Inside the tunnel, the air was thick with dust and silence. Jacob dropped to one knee, checking the small device in his pocket. The same data chip Kareth had left behind. Lyra leaned against the wall, sweat on her brow, her hand clutching a knife she hadn't drawn in years. I haven't felt this alive in forever. She whispered. Jacob looked up, his eyes catching hers. Funny thing to say while being hunted, he said. She gave a small, tired smile. Maybe it takes danger to remind us who we are. They moved deeper into the tunnels, past broken signs, cracked walls, and old posters from a forgotten war. Lyra stopped suddenly, her eyes scanning a faded symbol. I think we're close, she said, pointing to a rusted hatch. This leads to an old data vault. We stored records here. Before the city turned against us, Jacob raised an eyebrow. More proof? Maybe. Lyra nodded. Maybe the rest of the puzzle. They opened the hatch and descended into darkness. The vault smelled of metal, time, and forgotten truths. Lights flickered on as Lyra connected the wall panel to her wrist device. Rows of old machines blinked to life, coughing dust as they rebooted. This place hasn't been touched in years, Jacob said, running his hand along the consoles. Lyra moved quickly, focused and fierce. She pulled up files marked with the same symbol carved into Kareth's grave. Here, she said, opening a document. It was a transmission log, dates, commands, movements, troop activity. And Kareth's name was everywhere, not as a traitor, but as a loyal protector. A soldier who disobeyed orders only when those orders targeted civilians. Jacob read line after line. He saw clear evidence that Kareth refused to execute a planned strike that would have killed over 200 innocent settlers, humans and aliens. Instead, Kareth had led a covert rescue mission, saving lives but sacrificing his own reputation. Lyra's hands trembled as she read the orders that had condemned him. This was never about betrayal, she whispered. They feared him because he had a heart. Jacob clenched his fists. They turned him into a monster to cover their shame. But not anymore. They downloaded every document they could onto a portable drive. Lyra sealed it with her own. Biocode if I don't make it, she said. You give this to the Union Council. Jacob looked at her sharply. We're both making it, he said. No dying tonight. Suddenly, the vault lights blinked red. Jacob turned to the panel. Motion sensors had triggered. They've found us again, he said. How? Lyra gasped. Doesn't matter, Jacob replied. We move, now. They slipped out the back tunnel, but this time, soldiers were waiting. Black armor, glowing weapons, and no more warnings. A beam shot past Lyra's ear, too close. She screamed and fell behind cover. Jacob pulled his weapon, firing back with precision. He took down one, but more came. Lyra crawled to his side, blood on her cheek from a scrape. She tossed him a smoke flare from her old resistance pouch. Back exit, to the lift shaft, she yelled. Jacob nodded, pulled the pin, and smoke filled the corridor. They ran blind, coughing and stumbling. Behind them, lasers sizzled through. The haze, one grazed Jacob's leg. He bit back a cry, but he didn't stop. They reached the shaft, a long vertical tunnel once used for cargo lifts. The lift was gone, only cables remained. We climb, Lyra said. Jacob stared up the dark hole. That's a long way, he muttered. Do you have a better idea? She asked, already grabbing the cable. He followed, ignoring the pain in his leg. Step by step, they rose out of the underground. Below them, voices cursed and flashlights searched. But the two of them reached the top just in time. Lyra pushed, opened the emergency hatch, and fresh air hit her face. They were in the upper city now, lights glowing in the distance, sirens wailed behind them. They didn't stop running until they were 2 blocks away. Hidden behind an old transport station, Jacob collapsed onto a bench. Groaning, Lyra sat beside him, her hands shaking, but the drive was still in her pouch. Safe. They had the truth. They had the names, the orders, the voice of Kareth, and now they had a mission. Jacob looked at her, still with me. He asked. Lyra nodded, eyes fierce. Till the end, she whispered, and beyond. A new beginning at the grave. 3 days passed. 3 days of hiding, moving, sending pieces of truth through secure channels. They moved like ghosts through Rizaranine, each step watched, each breath measured, but something had changed in the city. People began whispering. The name Kareth, once forbidden, now echoed in markets, streets, and hidden forums. The message had spread. His voice, his files, his sacrifice, they were out in the open. The truth was no longer buried. Leaders tried to control the damage. Officials denied the files, but more and more voices rose, backing Kareth's story. Old allies rescued civilians, even retired soldiers, one by one. The wall of lies cracked, and now all eyes were on the grave that morning. Lyra stood once again at the edge of the alien graveyard. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dozens had gathered quietly, aliens and humans alike. There were candles, glowing, flowers placed in silence, and small children holding signs made of folded cloth. On each sign, one word was written in many languages. Hero. Jacob stood beside her, his injured leg wrapped tightly beneath his coat. He watched her closely as she stepped forward to the small marker that had once been plain and forgotten. Now it was clean, shining, with a new carving across the stone. Kareth's name, his rank. And beneath it, he protected all, not just his own. Lyra knelt beside the grave, her hand brushing the stone like she always did. But this time, she didn't weep. This time, her tears were different, soft, warm, and filled with peace. He never wanted to be known, she whispered. He only wanted to do what was right. Jacob placed a hand gently on her shoulder. And now everyone knows who he really was. A young alien girl stepped forward from the crowd, holding a folded cloth. She offered it to Lyra with both hands. Lyra unfolded it slowly. It was a resistance sash. Marked with Kareth's old symbol, Lyra's eyes filled again. She stood and tied the cloth to the marker, letting the wind carry it proudly. One by one, people stepped forward, placing tokens of respect, a human soldier's badge, an alien healer's ribbon, even a small hand-carved wooden bird. None of them spoke loudly. They didn't have to. Their presence was the loudest statement of all. Later that day, an official from the council arrived. Dressed in white robes, she stepped forward and faced Lyra directly. "The council has reviewed the evidence," she said, her voice measured but respectful, "and we were wrong." Lyra didn't speak. The words settled into her chest like a quiet thunder. The official bowed her head. "Kareth will be honored," she said, his name cleared and his story told. Jacob exhaled slowly. It was over. The mission they never asked for, the danger, the running, the silence, it had led to this moment. When the sun began to set, the crowd slowly faded. Lyra stayed behind. Sitting beside the grave once more, Jacob sat next to her, watching the skies change color. "I still miss him," she said softly. Jacob nodded. "You always will," he replied. "But now you can miss him with pride." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You changed everything," she said. He smiled gently. "No," he replied. "We did." The wind whispered through the stones, like the voices of the past finally at peace, and in that moment, Lyra realized something. She wasn't just a mourner anymore. She was a voice, a flame that refused to go out, and Jacob, the human who arrived as a stranger, was now something more. Not a replacement. Not a hero in Kareth's shadow, but a friend, a protector, someone who stayed. The stars began to appear again. Lyra stood and turned to Jacob. "Will you stay in Rylora?" she asked. He looked at the sky and then at her. "Maybe," he said. "As long as I'm needed," she smiled. For the first time in years, a smile not broken by pain. "You're needed," she said. They walked away from the grave together, not looking back, because now the story didn't end with loss. It continued with truth, with healing, and with the hope that maybe, just maybe, even in a galaxy torn by lies and war, one voice, one step, one human, could still make all the difference.